about how you race your car.
Very true. Very true. It's this the whole thing.
But
The argument. This is a never-ending argument too, as far as the cost of racing, what it takes to win, why the cost is going up. Because, like I said, I contacted over 30 drivers, over 30 people in racing, and I've got so many different answers, from fuel to the cars themselves to the engines, which I think you made an interesting point in our conversation earlier, talking about the 525 you can get for 10,000 versus an SB2 with 150 more horse you can build for the same price.
exactly, the motor piece of it for me, I don't. And we've always been open motor guys and this and that, but the crate motor piece of it has its place, and but on the same token, you can go buy an SB2 or an older 16-degree motor that still has a lot of life in it for less than what you're going to pay for a 525 in your car. The 604, not so much. But still, I don't know that the motor is the biggest piece of it, as much as people are making it out to be.
Which I'll agree with that. I think it's more the technology and the engineering and the time, the wind tunnel stuff that's driving the cost up, because now they're doing this. They've got to charge you more per car, more per part, which is, I think, probably the biggest factor. Those prices go up, and the racers, whether you're a car owner or a driver, whatever, you're going to spend the money.
Yeah, you're gonna, because you want to win.
Right.
I mean, it's just it's plain and simple. You want to win, but yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, motors are expensive. I don't care what motor you run; it's expensive. And if you want to go spend $70,000 on a motor, you can.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, trust me, you can go spend that. But I don't know that you really have to. I mean, we don't run new motors. We run really good motors, and we have a really good source to buy used motors.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to spend that money, you can. But if you don't have the means to spend that money, then you can go find other alternatives. And there's good motor builders around here that can freshen them up and put them all back together. And you got to keep up on them. And there's different things. And for some people that don't have the know-with-all to do a lot of their own motor work, we do a lot of our own motor work. Then it's probably, maybe that's a 525 better suited for you, or a 604. I mean, a lot of it's personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the modified, yes, the 604, because of the way the balance of the race car is with that motor, that's the best motor for that class, for IMCA.
Sure, absolutely.
But there are other ways to make it all work. But, motor-wise, that's all kind of, it is what it is, in my opinion. But
I agree. I don't think that's the biggest factor that's driving the cost up, at least not with what in the dirt world. I think it's...
No, I don't think so, yeah. And then, yes, you can go spend tons of money and do what's there, but just enough. Hold on.
But I think it goes back Go ahead.
I think, like the motor thing, if people make the statement that motors have driven the cost up in dirt late model racing in our area or in any regional area, yes, we run open motors, and like Dad said, we have really good used stuff, and it's not new stuff, but it's good quality stuff. It makes tons of power. So does Rob, so do a couple other guys in our area. But it's not like we did that in the last 2 years. I mean, we've had big open motors for the last almost decade at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that that's a fair statement to say that is the cost. That is the reason that racing is rising in costs, because people like us bring motors like that to the racetrack, because really we've been doing that for almost 10 years. And so I don't feel like that's it. I mean, yes, a lot of what he said was true with, each motor has its place depending on, each person's financial ability and the means at which they're willing to operate in, or the means at which they should operate in. Sometimes
Right.
That's not always the case for people. You see people that come into the sport big, and then they're there for a year or two, and then it breaks them, and then they're gone. I could see that, but
we have seen
I feel
that.
that's what they had to do.
Yeah.
It happens. It happens locally. It happens nationally. I've seen it in the last 5 years on a national level. We've seen it in the last 5 or 6 years on a regional weekly level. So it happens all across the country, and I don't think that there's I don't know if there's a whole bunch you can do to that. That's all personal preference. I think each person sets themselves up for whether it be success or failure in that situation.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no argument to that. I agree. It's you're either going to race within your means and be competitive in your division, or you're going to go race in a division where you can't afford to and get less than stellar equipment and it's worn out and you don't know how to drive the car and you're going to get stomped. And then you just said, hey, I'm not having any fun. I'm done. Or
exactly.
the motor blows up and you're done because you can't afford to buy another one because you spent all your money on the race car.
Well, and I think in our area, one of the biggest classes arguably we have right now is the street stock deal, and Chris Stein has done awesome with this Iron Giant deal, and the idea to that is awesome. And I think it's brought a lot of interest back into street stock racing. But if you look at it, there's a lot of people that bought street stocks because it was a cheap way to go race and be competitive. There's a lot of guys that are either spending money or outworking those guys that just went and bought a car to drive that are now making that class more, I can't really say expensive, because you can still be competitive without spending all that money. I mean, you can spend all winter long building a car that you did yourself and did it on a small sweat equity. It is a good way to put it. You can
Sure.
build a car for the same amount that you're going to buy one for, but it's made that class a lot more difficult to be competitive. The Calyaks, the Brian Crunks, the Kevin Roberts of the world. I mean, the Ron Brewsters, all those guys, David Cronk, all those guys have stepped the game up as far as competition level in that class. And I don't know if it turns people away, but it makes people look a lot harder at, well, I could probably go buy this car up the road for $2,000 and go race. Whereas now that car for $2,000 is a car for $2,000, but in order to be that fast, you either need to spend the money to make it faster or spend the time to make it faster yourself. But at that point, you then need to learn it. So it's a process. And you've seen that class. I don't know statistically how car counts have been at those bigger races, but if you look at the winners of those races, the guys that have won those races have been around the sport a long time. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They have some background in it. It's not like they just got a street stock and started racing a year ago.
No, you're seeing the veteran drivers win those races, and that's another class that there's been a lot of talk as far as the cost of racing goes. Even at the street stock level, guys are now spending $10,000-$12,000 buying these cars and putting their engines in to go race. Whereas before, when it was quote unquote an entry level class, a guy could go buy a $2,000 car, like you said, and run up front. That is even starting to go by the wayside at the entry level divisions.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I know when we had my street stock for whatever a year and a half it was, I think we paid $3,000 for it turnkey, and managed to blow it up the first night in practice, which was less than stellar. But then that got us into another motor, and that it got rather expensive for us. But I mean, I ran that motor for 4 or 5 years after that in my late model car, so it didn't, in the long run, didn't really hurt us. But it starts off cheap, and depending on where you want to take it, makes it expensive. It's all leads back to personal preference. I think a lot of us all have that competitive desire to go win. I mean, the funny thing is I have a competitive desire to beat my dad, and he has the same desire to beat me. But in reality, we're both spending the same money. He knows what I'm doing, and I know what he's doing. So reality is we're both on the same playing field. So then it comes back to who's driving better. And at that point, it's he just outdid me today. One of those deals. And there's not very many people that just take that. I guess. I mean, you don't have to take that. I guess you just there's not many people that look at it that way. All of us go back to work and are going to make ourselves better the next week or, the next year or whatever it may be. At the end of the year, you run second by 10 points. And you're like, well, if I had finished 2 spots ahead and 3 races, you do the math in your head and you
drive yourself crazy.
Point it out to where, exactly, you drive yourself insane over it. And,
yeah.
But then all winter long, you think about that and you're like, it makes you work harder. And
spend more money.
So I think you spend more. Yeah, you're either spending more money or you're working harder. One of the two or both.
Right.
It just depends on the kind of person you are and how you want to achieve your goals. But that's my opinion. That's Dad's opinion. I mean, there's a million other people out there that probably think we're smoking crack or something. But
no, but that's that's the thing we were talking about earlier. Asking all these different people, and I asked people from multiple parts of the country, the same question, and I got so many different answers. It was actually pretty overwhelming because I thought we're going to have 1 or 2 channels here where people are looking at where this is what's costing or this is what's costing more. This is why racing is going up, and I got 15 different areas from all these drivers going, no, it's more expensive because of this. No, it's more expensive because of that. Because of the rules they give us, it makes it more expensive. The cost of fuel, everything. I mean, it is like you said, a personal deal of why racing is so expensive. Because where you're going to spend money in one area on your car, the next guy's going to spend it in a different area on his car. Whether it's engine,
yep.
whether it's shocks, tires, the R&D with wind tunnels and the the pull down rigs. I mean, all of that, it adds up. So I don't think there's really one true factor of why the cost is going up as we see it. But I think when you're talking like nationally on a level you guys are doing it at, and the cars that are being purchased, purpose-built race cars, it goes back to the manufacturers doing the research, doing the wind tunnels, the pull-down rigs, all this knowledge, and that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the knowledge.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of that work for you to give you a race car that, the cars that are being produced now are so much better than they were, say, even 5-10 years ago. Like, your dad mentioned with the do-call tubing and the way it affects the car coming back to its original state and the flex that's allowed, how it hooks the car up. That alone, they're saying, is worth $3,000 before the car's even started to be produced.
And that's the crazy part, is it all goes back to each manufacturer and making their car better. And it's funny, you look at dirt late models in our market and you look at chassis per track condition per part of the country, and each chassis has its own area at which it's better than others.
Exactly.
You go to a hard tire race, or somewhere in the, say, Arizona Wild West Shoot. That's a perfect example. 55 rule, and you have some good competition that shows up. There are certain chassis that do well there, and there are certain chassis that struggle there. Whereas you go to a World Outlaw race in Mississippi, there are the tire rule and the track condition that you're put on. There are some chassis that do great there, and there are some chassis that do not so great. And so it's a regional thing. It's where you pick to race, and I think tires have a lot to do with the chassis that you pick. I mean, I'm not going to pick a car that's good on soft tires when I race on hard tires every week. It wouldn't make any sense for me. And I think that's why you see so much standardization in tires across the sport right now, which there's ups and downs to that after racing 9 races on a spec tire rule. I spent just as much money racing on non-cut, non-siped tires as I would on cut and siped tires. So I'm really not sure that that's the answer. And actually, there was a conversation in the drivers' meeting at the races that I were at that's probably not the answer, and a discussion is going to be had, and the rule will be changed probably here in the next 2 weeks as far as the races that I'm going to go run. Just because, when you show up to the racetrack as, I'm going to use Lucas Oil MLRA as an example. When they show up to the racetrack with 100 tires on their trailer in a 3-day weekend, they sold all 100 tires when they would never normally do that. There's probably an issue. So it didn't save money. The purpose is to save money. I don't know how it will react here as far as the 55 go. Every tire reacts a little differently to heat. I burn up a LM40 uncut